Hello, everybody. How are you today? Have you had a nice day? Tuesday, I think today, isn't it? I've been alright. Still working on this blooming book, trying to get the edit done. Honestly, these last few days or weeks, however long it takes, when you read it through for the last time, and you know that this is it. Anything I forget now is going to be in here forever, and I am still finding things. And it's so stressful. And it's just so exhausting because you're literally reading every word and then probably going back and reading them again just to be sure, and then going back again just to be sure. So yeah, a bit frazzled today, but I'm all right. Looking forward to chilling out with you guys for a couple of chapters. Alex and Z and Simon in the city. The city has basically been overrun by Furness's berserkers. He's basically started a war. He's thought, you know what? They've escaped my prison. Let's just start a war. So he's thrown a load of berserkers into the city, and the berserkers are biting people and turning them into rats. These mindless killers that are just dripping nectar. It's a new kind of nectar. And Alex and Z and Simon have taken shelter inside a cathedral, the biggest cathedral in the city, St. Martin's, and there's a few people hiding out in there, including a priest and a security guard and a few other people. But there's also a boy on the floor, and the boy has been bitten, and he's starting to turn into one of Furness's freaks. Furness is also somehow communicating with Alex, sending him messages, and Simon seems to think it's through the nectar in Alex's blood that he can channel thoughts and emotions into anyone who's got nectar in them. Okay, so Z has just asked the people in the church to tie up the boy who's been bitten. This chapter is called Toilet Break. I thought we were in for a Force 10 riot. The second Z gave his order, the man with glasses stood bolt upright, hands knotted into small fists. "Don't you dare touch him," he said, his voice so low and so hoarse it sounded demonic. His eyes, too, were flaring in a way that made me think of the devil, except I'd already been to hell. I knew the truth about demons. "I swear." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. His body language did all the talking. Z held up a hand, silently begging them to listen. "I'm not saying we should hurt him," he said, his voice calm. "But trust me, if he was bitten, then something's going to happen to him. He's going to..." He looked at Simon and me, his eyes imploring us to help. "He's going to become a monster," Lucy said, pulling herself up from her seat and leaning on the carved wooden finial of the pew. "There's something in him. What did you call it?" "Nectar," said Z. "Nectar," Lucy repeated, dropping down onto her haunches near the boy. People in the crowd were protesting, those who'd been seated making their way towards the aisle to hear our story. Lucy spoke over their muttered remarks. "I'm a nurse. Well, I'm training. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it, if someone just like him hadn't tried to kill me. But it's true. If that nectar stuff is in his veins, then he's turning. He'll become feral, aggressive. He'll lose his mind." "Look," said the man, "I don't know who you are, but you're talking nonsense. He's in shock. He's got a serious wound in his neck, and he needs rest, warmth, and water. You can't tie him up. I forbid it." "Forbid it all you want," Lucy said. "If you don't get some restraints on him, then I'm getting the hell out of here. You want the truth? You poke that head of yours out the door and take a look at what's going on. There are kids out there." She paused for long enough to reach out a hand and press it against the boy's cheek. "There are kids out there, and something is happening to them. They're tearing the city apart." "Start from the beginning," the priest said. "Please." "Are you sure?" Z asked. "It's a long story." "From the sounds of things, we've got a long wait before anybody comes to rescue us," replied the priest. Z opened his mouth, but before he could begin, I burst in. Is there a bathroom here I can use?" I asked. The priest nodded, pointing behind him. "Over there, by the transept, down the stairs in the crypt." I thanked him and set off, only to hear him shout, "Please don't steal anything from the gift shop or the cafeteria." "I need to go as well," Simon shouted, trotting to catch up. Z was mumbling something at us, but the crowd had surrounded him now and were urging him on. We left him to it, squeezing past the last few stragglers and following the nave to the huge open space beneath the dome. I looked up as we walked, but the vaulted ceiling was lost in shadow. It was easy to believe there were creatures up there, clinging onto the rafters, faces like gargoyles ready to drop down and feed. So I let my head fall, concentrating on the floor. It took us a while to find the entrance to the crypt, and when we did, I felt my throat choke up. "Oh, underground again," I said as Simon ducked through the low stone archway and traipsed down a narrow spiral staircase. He laughed without humour, keeping one hand on the newel post as he led the way. We walked deeper and deeper, the twisting stairs seeming to go on forever, but just as claustrophobia began to grip me, we emerged into a light, airy corridor. To the left were 2 doors marked men and women, respectively. Simon pushed through into the gents, holding the door open for me. There were 2 urinals. Urinals? I don't know how you say it. It's like one of those words you never really say. Anyway, there were 2 urinals, and I took one, surprised when he squeezed himself in next to me. I said, suddenly self-conscious. You want me to use the cubicle?" he asked as he went, grinning that lopsided grin of his. "Too late. Come on. Don't be shy. Unless..." He leaned in even closer. "The warden didn't experiment on your you-know-what, did he?" "No," I retorted, the mere idea killing off any last hope of relieving myself. I waited until Simon had finished before trying to relax, the sound of the taps running doing a bit to help. "Wow," Simon said. "Warm water. You remember that?" I rinsed my hands under the tap, the sensation of hot water on my skin bringing back too many memories. Showers at home after soccer training, washing up the dishes after dinner, and the sense of loss was so overpowering that my face screwed up, hard enough to make it ache. Simon must have noticed, because he turned away with an uncomfortable expression, then thought better of it and clapped me twice on the shoulder. "Come on," he said. "Poor old Z probably needs some help. You know how he gets when he's stressed." We walked back to the spiral staircase and started climbing, but after a dozen or so steps, Simon stopped, turning to face me. "Alex," he said quietly, "how the hell did it get so bad so quickly?" The stone walls pressed in, trapping us in a bubble of darkness that felt protective rather than threatening. "I don't know," I replied. "It's just..." Simon seemed to choke on his words. "How did Furness manage to get his army into the city so quickly? I mean, his creeps were here almost as soon as we got out." "He knew we were escaping," I finished when Simon faltered again. "The warden told him. Remember that phone? That's why Furness sent those 2 berserkers to the prison. That's how he had time to get everything else in place." Simon looked unsure, and it took a nudge from me to make him spill the rest of his thoughts. "It's more than that. In the vision, back in the subway, he said that we forced his hand, made him start his war today, right?" I nodded, trying not to think about what I'd seen after the berserker had bitten me, what Alfred Furness had told me. Simon shuffled uncomfortably, then looked me right in the eye. "This break, us getting out, it wasn't a blow for Furness. It was exactly what he wanted. And I don't think we escaped." He left the sentence hanging, and all of a sudden the silence in the stairwell was replaced by the roar of my pulse in my ears as I realised what he was saying. "I think he let us out." No, that's impossible," I said, shaking my head as I remembered everything we'd gone through to force our way out of the prison. There was simply no way that Furness could have engineered all of that. Why would he let us all go just to try and catch us again? "He's not trying to catch us," Simon said. "The police are, sure, but Furness, he's trying to turn us. He wants us out here, tearing the world apart." I was still shaking my head, but I only had to look out onto the streets of the city to know the truth. "No," I barked, pushing past Simon and almost tripping up the stairs. "There's no way. We're wrong. Furness is crazy. He's off his head. They both are, him and the warden. The army's here now anyway. They'll handle it. We just need to stay alive." "But they don't know what they're dealing with," Simon said. "If Furness is filling this city with berserkers, if his rats are pouring onto the streets, infecting anyone they bite, then the army's just walking into a trap. They'll get eaten alive out there." I don't think he was talking literally, but I know we both had the same image in our heads. Simon was right. The rats, these new ones, were fast and they were angry, and by the looks of things their numbers were spreading. They'd attack without mercy, without hesitation, and those of their victims who didn't die stood a good chance of turning into bloodthirsty freaks themselves. I thought about the faces of those soldiers we'd seen on television, how young some of them looked. I didn't know how the nectar worked, only that the warden had told me adults couldn't handle it. But where was the cut-off point? 16? 18? 20? Coming here was a mistake, Simon said as we walked through the arch into the main body of the cathedral. City's going to be swarming. There'll be nowhere left to hide. We should grab Z and Lucy and keep moving. Get out of here before... There will be no getting out of here. The words were spat from the shadows, and we both flinched. The priest was standing there, bathed in darkness. Our only plan is prayer, and our only escape is God. This is Armageddon, the last battle of good and evil before the day of judgment. We must believe, my children, and we must sacrifice. Oh, yes, we must sacrifice. I shared a look with Simon as we walked towards the door, a look that was echoed in his furrowed brow. Out there was hell, but inside this cathedral a storm was brewing. I could feel it, and I didn't like it. Not one bit. Trouble. I'm sure we had a chapter called Trouble. Maybe it was in a different book. That's so weird. I'm sure we did. Must be imagining it. Trouble. It was darker in the cathedral now, and it took me a minute to work out why. The huge doors at the front of the building, the ones we'd entered through, were now closed and bolted, chains looped between the handles and sealed with padlocks, better suited to a medieval dungeon. Looks like we're here to stay, I whispered to Simon as he stepped out after me. The priest was close behind, his eyes like burning suns as he stepped around the last bend. I noticed that the white band in his collar had come loose, folded up like a broken bow tie. Join the flock, he commanded, and it was a command. There was no doubt about that. Any hint of the friendliness and warmth he displayed when we arrived was now long gone. He ushered us across the open floor beneath the dome, back towards his congregation. They were huddled together even more tightly now, watching us approach with a mix of expressions, all unreadable in the growing darkness. The kid hadn't been moved, but I was relieved to see that one of his arms had been secured with a plastic cuff to the leg of a pew. The security guard was standing over him, one chubby hand resting on her holstered pistol. The man with the glasses was back on his knees, cradling the child's head and glowering at Z, who sat on a pew a few rows back, Lucy beside him. I made straight for Z, excusing myself as I pushed through the crowd. Thanks, he snapped, sitting forward. You left me to tell the whole story on my own. Oh, we'd have just messed it up, I replied. You're good with words. Besides, I nudged him. You had Lucy to help you. His elbow nudged back hard into my ribs, but he couldn't completely hide the smile on his face as he crashed back against the pew. The priest was standing by the altar, genuflecting so energetically that it looked as if he was conducting an aerobics class. His strangled prayers drifted back to us, garbled words that meant nothing to me. Did they believe you? Simon asked. Z studied the crowd, then looked at Lucy. No idea, she replied for him. I'm having a hard time believing everything you've said, and I've seen it for myself. Well, there's a pretty good chance they're about to see it first-hand too, I said, nodding at the kid on the floor. His face was growing darker, like a dead flower decomposing in the sun. How is he? Oh, he's getting worse by the second, Z replied. I felt hot breath on the back of my neck and turned to see the security guard there. She was short and stocky, and her face was fierce, but she had a sliver of warmth in her eyes. Feeling better? She asked. It took me a moment to realise she was talking about our toilet break, and I nodded. Good, because I've got a funny feeling things are going to get weird. She leaned in, whispering conspiratorially. That man, he's not a priest. Seriously? I asked, a little too loudly. He's the caretaker, the security guard went on. I work here sometimes, do the night shift. I've seen him before, but wearing overalls and carrying a mop. He's a real dyed-in-the-wool right-wing Bible-spouting head case if his talk's down in the staff room or anything to go by. The bishop would normally get here about now, but something tells me he ain't coming to church today. He lives over in the palace. He'd never get across town, not now. So what's he doing? Z asked, staring at the man in black robes. The guard shrugged her hefty shoulders, standing straight, massaging her lower back with both hands. I don't know, and that's what worries me. He's started spouting on about the Armageddon or the apocalypse or some such. Trouble is, these people, She gestured across the church with her hand. "A divine nutjob's too, and he's stirring them up something wicked. Most were here for an early Sunday prayer or two. The cathedral doors are never locked." "They're locked now," I said. She nodded, her chins doubling in size and number. "We heard noises out there when you were downstairs doing your business. I don't know what they were. Sounded like feeding time at the zoo." She was fiddling with her holster, popping the stud and clicking it back in. "Saw something too. Out on the plaza. Looked like... I don't know what it looked like." "A berserker," Z finished. "Might have been the one from Two Fields." "We all agreed it would be better if we locked up," the guard said. "If what you told us is true, then there's nothing out there but trouble." She peeked at the priest, still prostrating himself at the altar. "Trouble out there. Trouble in here too, if you ask me. Now, I know you kids have been in prison, but you seem all right. I never approved of that bloody penitentiary anyway. Just watch out for yourselves, okay? In my opinion, there's nowhere more dangerous than a church on the eve of the end of days, especially if people think you're on the wrong side." A shadow swept across the pews, a fleeting shape forged of light and colour that fluttered from the altar to the doors in the blink of an eye. Every head in the cathedral shot up in time to see a silhouette scamper over the window ledge outside, vanishing just as fast to leave nothing but the clack of feet on stone and a high-pitched howl, ebbing into silence. "Think they know we're in here?" Simon asked. Nobody answered, but I didn't think those freaks did. If they had any idea there were human hearts beating warm blood in the cathedral, they'd be in here like a shot. They were probably just using the building as a lookout point. If we were quiet, they might leave us alone. But from the look of things, quiet wasn't going to be an option. "This is not a time for talking," bellowed the priest caretaker from his altar, his hands held high, beseeching the cathedral's invisible ceiling. "This is a time for praying. Call upon the Lord to carry us in his arms, to keep us safe from the great annihilation. Together we shall offer him a sign of our faith. Together we shall rise into his kingdom." "I ain't rising into anyone's kingdom," muttered Simon. But most of the crowd had taken to their pews or were on their knees in the centre aisle, their mouths moving in time with the priests as he recited something from the Bible. His voice grew more shrill with each verse, specks of spittle flying from his mouth, his eyes even wider now, not blinking. I heard scraping from above us, like there was something running on the roof, running fast. And the kid on the floor was in bad shape. He began to cough, the man with the glasses lifting the boy's head just as a fountain of black liquid exploded from his mouth. It spattered over the uneven tiles, seeming to squirm and wriggle like a puddle of beetles, red flecks sparkling. The kid's throat had swollen to the same size as his head, his breathing wheezy and ragged. His hands were bigger than they had been, poking out from the pile of coats like rubber gloves filled with tar. He lurched, hard enough to pull the pew toward him. The plastic cuff gouged into his mottled arm, letting loose another trail of nectar. Do you think you can loosen this?" Glasses Man asked, but the security guard just shook her head. I didn't blame her. Those pews weighed a ton, and it had to have taken some strength to move one. Another shape landed on the window ledge, slipping for a moment as it tried to gain purchase. Somebody in the cathedral screamed, but there was a hand over his mouth before the noise could really get going. We all stood there, as still as the statues around us, until with a guttural roar the shape launched itself from the ledge back down to the street below. Almost instantly, the impostor priest's shrill prayers continued, deafening after the silence. The two of them were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulphur." "Hey!" the security guard hissed, firing the word at the priest. He showed no sign of hearing her, calling out with even more force as he talked about a white knight and a golden sword. She tried again, louder this time. "Hey, you! Shut up for a minute or they're going to hear us!" The priest kept talking, each sentence capped with a chorus of amens from his flock. The hum of voices was swelling like a tide, filling the cathedral with white noise, threatening to spill from the windows into the streets beyond. "Stop it," the security guard went on, her own voice now too loud. "Just stop it. You're only the bloody cleaner, for God's sake." At this, the man's eyes, so wide, so motionless they could have belonged to a corpse, rotated in their dry sockets towards her. There was no expression on his face, but beneath that, in the way his jaw muscles danced, the way the tendons in his neck bulged, I could see a fury of insanity and delusion fit to burst. "No," he said, "I am more than that. I am God's servant, called here today to lead his flock into the new world. He has appointed me his earthly messenger, and through me you shall all be saved." Christ, who does this wacko remind you of? Simon asked. And it was true. What he was saying now could have come right from the mouth of Alfred Furness himself, without all the religious stuff, of course. The priest turned his lunatic gaze our way. "Not everyone can be saved," he said, his voice high and wavering like a child's. "Judgment Day is approaching. The Lord is testing us, for only the most faithful shall pass through the valley of death." He doesn't even know what he's talking about, Z said. "Can you take him, do you think?" "I can," Simon said, edging forward. The priest pointed at us with one bony finger. "He's testing us with these demons," he screamed. "The devil's spawn, who have only today broken free from the bowels of hell. They are not part of his flock." Excuse me, I had a bit of a cough. "They are not destined for the kingdom of the light. Seize them, my children, for only by slaying the legions of the beast will we be judged worthy." "Oh boy," said Z, using the pew in front to pull himself up. "Here we go again." "You're insane," I shouted at the crowd. "We're not demons, we're kids like your own." But my silver eyes must have looked pretty unholy in the dim light of the cathedral, because people were already easing themselves out of their seats and advancing up the aisle. I bunched my fists. I didn't want to hurt a bunch of pensioners, but now that the doors were locked, there was nowhere to turn, to run. The promise of violence was charging the nectar up inside me, my body an engine about to be shunted into gear. I fought it, taking deep breaths, trying to stay calm, but black veins were already throbbing in the corners of my vision, common sense and self-control fading into the background as the poison turned my thoughts to murder. I clamped my eyes shut. The outline of the massive cross of the altar splashed across my retinas. It didn't fade. It expanded against the backdrop of my eyelids, morphing from a crucifix into what looked like a tower. Yes, it was a tower. It took shape like a photographic negative being developed, windows and doors and a spire slowly emerging. And all around the tower the night seemed to flicker, sparks dancing as if the world was on fire. "Demons," said a voice, that same age-old, ground-shaking whisper, Alfred Furness, once more in my head. "Show him the truth. Show him that you are not a creature of his God, nor of his devil. Show him that you are a work of man, a genius creation, one of the soldiers of the fatherland who has claimed this time as his own." I realised I was groaning, each word splitting my skull open a little wider. I opened my eyes, saw the flesh of my arm begin to swell even more, the nectar that raged through my mind also wreaking havoc with my body. "No," I mumbled, poison rushing up my throat, into my mouth, almost gagging me. I spat a mouthful, not caring where it went. The image was still there, the tower layered over reality like a transparency, and I saw it again, the creature perched on the spire, a beast that could have been a devil, or maybe a god, baying at the flames, preparing to unleash a nightmare upon the world. "Go on, Alex. Show this pathetic man his future." Were those words coming from the creature I saw, that giant of twisted flesh? Was that thing really Alfred Furness? It was impossible to tell. "Take him by the throat and show him the true religion, not a benevolent deity, but a new race." Another noise spilled from my mouth, more a growl now than a groan. I felt my new arm itch, and I ripped the tattered sleeve of the hoodie away so that I could dig my fingers into the pus-bloated skin. It was a roasting, so hot that it felt as if I put my good hand against a grill. I pulled it away, my face crushed into a grimace of confusion. See their true form, the priest spat, pointing at my arm, almost jumping on the spot. They are demons. Take your son, Abraham, sacrifice him as a burnt offering. It is so written, so shall it be. Burn them and earn your place by his side. The priest and his flock were still coming, faster now, urged on by the panic in the man's voice. Take one more step and I'll shoot your heads right off. The security guard screamed. Her pistol was out, shaking so much she could have been standing on a funhouse walkway at the fair. The crowd must have sensed her fear because most were still advancing, men and women who yesterday had probably been loving parents, who had cuddled their grandchildren, who now had that same psychotic gleam in their eyes. Stay back! I'm warning you! I saw a man behind her, tweed jacket, white hair, but I didn't realise what he was doing until it was too late. Even as he lifted the candlestick, I was running, leaping over a pew and stretching out a hand to block the strike. I was too slow. The huge silver club thumping down on the guard's head, her hat crumpling. She dropped like a bowling pin, wearing a look of surprise that was almost comical. The man snatched the gun from her hand before she hit the floor. He saw me coming and pulled the trigger, the shot zinging over my head. I slid to my knees, hands held up in surrender. At this range, if he fired again, he couldn't miss. For the few seconds it took the pistol shot to fade, nobody moved. Then the priest strode forth, hissing his orders through an idiot grin. Yes, the time has come to act. We shall honour you, Lord. We shall sacrifice in your name. He held up his hands to the heavens, foam spilling from the corners of his mouth. We shall burn them! Sorry, I got a bit carried away there. Okay, I'll stop there because I get a bit too excited. The next chapter is called Burnt Offerings. Oh dear. I just also want to point out that I have a new favourite word, and that word is pew. It's so satisfying to say. You should try it. Pew! I think it's because it reminds me of Star Wars. Pew, 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 pew. But it probably should just be pronounced pew. But pew! It's just like something about the shape of the word is just so satisfying. Pew! Pew! So there we go. Every time I see a pew in the book, I'm going to say it like that. Pew! Oh, I'm so easily pleased. Anyway, I really enjoyed that. That was a really satisfying chapter to act out. And yeah, we'll be back tomorrow for some more horrific Escape from Furnace fugitives. Anyway, hope you have a really nice night or daytime if you're overseas. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.